All right, folks. Well, I'm pleased to be joined by Mitch Gallo from TSN 690 in Montreal. Thanks for taking the time to join me today, Mitch.
Hey, no problem. My pleasure.
You know, it's not really fair that we don't get a chance to see you that much because we're just used to hearing you. So, no matter what anybody says, you don't have a face for radio, my friend. You should get in front of the camera more often.
You're too nice, but stop lying right off the bat.
Hey, no, I mean it. But thanks for joining us today. So right off the bat here, what is the thing that you enjoy most about working at TSN 690? And tell us how long you've been there now.
So I've been with TSN in some type of capacity for about 12 years. So since 2008, and then full time, I think, since 2014 when I joined Mitch Melnick's show in the afternoon. So it's been a little while, and I guess my favorite thing is the fact that I get to work in an environment where I'm able to be creative and show my personality and have fun. I get to talk sports, which is always pretty advantageous and pretty fun. And also I get to work with somebody like Mitch Melnick who teaches me, and I get to learn a lot from. Learning from him, it would be, a lot of it is just you learn it in a subconscious type of way. Like you just kind of pick up some of the things that he does that maybe the regular person might not even realize, but you say, man, everything was planned. Like when he goes into his show, he has a master plan and it's all mapped out in his mind. And even though we don't know what direction he's going, and even sometimes it might seem spontaneous, you could just see the wheels always turning inside his head. So that's something I've really picked up on. And, the other thing is just the sheer work ethic and determination to put on the best possible show. There's no shows off. There's no segments off. Like everything is always as planned, and we're always as prepared as can be. So, going into things, not to say that I didn't have a good work ethic or that I wasn't prepared when I work, but certainly to see somebody do it and do it for so long and as good as he's been able to do it, I'm able to pick up on those things.
During this COVID-19 pandemic, how have you guys worked to try to keep content coming to fans without sports happening right now?
Yeah, it's for sure it's for sure been a real challenge, and then it becomes trying to go back to what I was talking about before and be creative and find ways that are going to stimulate the audience, ways that are going to get people engaged. It's definitely not easy with no live sports, but we've always found a way to do it. We've dealt with NHL lockouts. We've dealt with times in the summer where it's very slow sports-wise. Sure, we've never dealt with anything necessarily like this, but you always find a way. And I guess the biggest thing is a lot of people ask me, okay, how do you do a show without any sports? Well, we're doing a show, and the show must go on even if there's no sports. So where there's a will, there's a way, and we find stuff to talk about every day. And some days I'll go in and I'll be like, oh wow, maybe it's going to be a struggle today. And then the red light turns on and the show flies by like it would even when we do have sports.
One of the main shows that you host on the channel that I've listened to, of course, so frequently and had the pleasure of speaking with you and a lot of the other hosts is the Mar Postgame Show after each and every Montreal Canadiens game. Would you be able just to maybe talk about that and maybe how much, not just you miss it, but talk about the show that you guys normally are on?
I love doing that show. I mean, for starters, I get to work with Sean Campbell, and he started the exact same time as me, and we've worked a ton together on stuff. Even though we have our full-time gigs, we've worked together a ton, and we have a great rapport and a great chemistry, so that makes it super easy. And then I love stuff that is fresh and live, so we are talking about the game right after it happens. So you can't get any more immediacy than that. So the fact that it's bang right after the game finishes and we're talking about what we just saw, I mean, that's my favorite part. And then even though at times I make it sound like I don't necessarily like the interaction with all the listeners, deep down, I do. I like to play it up that I like to poke the bear a little bit sometimes. But I do love hearing the feedback from all the listeners because I know Montreal Canadiens fans are so passionate and they have so much to say and they have such varied opinions that it makes for a good time after every game.
What's your favorite thing about the post-game show? There's a lot of different segments, a lot of interactions with fans, a lot of engagement. So what is your favorite thing about it if you have to pick one?
It would be when the callers tend to go off the rails a little bit. I think when they're
Not Montreal
Canadiens
fans, right?
Yeah, exactly. Definitely not Montreal Canadiens. And it really works both ways, right? When they're head over heels for the team, and also when the team isn't playing well. I have a lot of fun when the team is winning because fans exaggerate their belief in that as well. So you get 5 wins in a row, and they think they're going to win the Stanley Cup, and people are calling while honking their horns, driving their cars. I'll listen to the show. Or you get the other side of things where they're not playing bad, and everyone wants everybody in the organization to get fired. I enjoy just how passionate the fans are and how the fans love to call in at the highest of highs and the lowest of lows.
With 24 Stanley Cup championships, everybody in the sports world, beyond even hockey, knows it, that the Canadiens have the most championships. But is there a sense of entitlement maybe among some fans? I think you and I have discussed this, where they're just expecting another championship yesterday. Do you find that?
Definitely. And it's fans of the generation that saw a lot of those Stanley Cups. They were spoiled rotten, to be very honest with you. And sometimes I think those fans have a hard time understanding that the game then is very different than the game now. There's more teams, it's more competitive. It's just a completely different landscape. And you hear those fans when they call and they go back and they say, in my day it was Stanley Cup or bust, and now we're just hoping to make the playoffs. Well, that's how things are right now. Every team is just hoping to make the playoffs. So I definitely think there is that sense that you're talking about. At the same time, though, I do think that 1993 until now is much too long, and the Canadiens are due for a Stanley Cup. So I get like how fans can get frustrated when they were used to the glory days, because now we're at some pretty low times for the Montreal Canadiens and their fans. Like, just imagine that we're currently part of a generation, not myself, I saw them win the Stanley Cup in 93 as did you, but I have friends that are a little bit younger than me where their best memories are conference finals appearances, and that's, for a team like the Canadiens, that's kind of unacceptable because as much as I was talking about how competitive it is now, you just look at Major League Baseball. The Canadiens equivalent is the New York Yankees, and baseball's just as competitive as the NHL is. I know there's no salary cap in baseball. There's a luxury tax, and it's a little bit different, but still the New York Yankees have found a way to win championships in recent memory, where the Canadiens now are going on a very long time.
Let's talk about this current regime of the Montreal Canadiens. As it stands right now, we're waiting to hear confirmation on a early June draft. How does this potentially throw a wedge in the Canadiens' plans to make this team better in the short term with guys like Carey Price and Shea Weber still around?
Well, I mean, it makes it very difficult because it's not what they were planning for. They weren't planning for a June draft. They weren't planning for a draft where they wouldn't have the opportunity to make trades. I think it's 14 draft picks that they have, and you're only allowed 51 contracts. They have 21 draft picks over the last 2 drafts as well. That's 35 plus the players on the current roster. They don't have enough room to fit in all these players. So that puts a big dent in Marc Bergevin's plans. And also, before, there was a chance that they could have won the lottery and jumped up to draft first overall. And now with the June draft and the potential scenarios, you're looking at a 4th pick, an 8th pick, or a 9th pick, and nothing else. Detroit drafting either 1 or 2. It's extremely unfair, and it puts the Canadiens in a really difficult spot. I think the latest is maybe we're not going to have a June draft. It looks like the owners are really going to fight back against that, and I would think that Jeff Molson and Marc Bergevin would be right at the front of the heap as far as people voicing extreme displeasure for this plan by the NHL.
So as for our conversation right now, there's no word that this is a done deal then.
Oh no, I'd be very surprised if the draft ended up being in June at this point.
Very interesting. Well, that's why we have conversations on the fly, because we're all still learning this as we go. And the latest expectation, according to some of the media that's been out there, is that these plans that Bergevin had and the Canadiens had for fixing this team was just going to be out the window. So if you're Marc Bergevin, let's just say hypothetically there is a June draft and Gary Bettman and the NHL get their way, how do you approach trying to make this team better before next season?
I mean, there's so much unknown, so it's very difficult to answer that question. I mean, for starters, you take the best possible player you can with wherever you're drafting, whether it's 4, 8, or 9, and then you draft away with whatever work Trevor Kuntz has done, and then who knows? Maybe you're in the playoffs in a 24-team format, and you can actually get your fans excited about the product next year, and you can gain some experience in the playoffs for some of your guys that otherwise weren't going to make it. And then you approach a free agency by selling what you just accomplished or didn't accomplish in the playoffs, right? So we also, I mean, we don't know what the salary cap is going to be. We don't know if there's going to be some kind of rollback on the salaries. We don't, like, just imagine, for instance, Taylor Hall, right? This guy, he's worked his whole life to be an unrestricted free agent. And all of a sudden, based on the numbers, the salary cap could drop from 83 to 63 $1 million per team on the high end of things. How's a team going to afford to pay Taylor Hall the $10 million that he was, seeking to get, maybe more? There's just so much unknown at this point that I don't really know how to answer your question. The only thing I could say is the Canadiens are going to have to kind of stay status quo for the time being.
What is it about radio that attracted you to covering this team? Because there's a lot of media outlets that cover this team and even other Montreal sports, but you guys seem to be able to have a lot of coverage in a unique way because you are on the radio.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's necessarily anything that attracted me, because the first year that I covered the Canadiens in any capacity was actually for the Canadian Press as a writer. So I did that for one season before jumping into radio. But the thing I like about radio is it's live. I love how the immediacy of it. I love how we could jump on right during the intermission of a game and talk about, the thing that we saw 5 minutes earlier, where some of the other media outlets, it's a little bit more challenging to do so. Also, like in radio compared to, say, something like television, we deal a lot less with time restrictions. It's a lot more clamped down on television than it is on radio, and you can really expand your thoughts. I mean, just look at the long segments we do. There's no way you could pull something like that off on television or on any of the other media. So I think it's the immediacy and the long form that I like about radio compared to some of the other outlets.
You mentioned earlier working with Mitch Melnick, and you said, of course, he does have a master plan before each show. But then, how much of your show then becomes go with the flow improvisation as you're going?
Well, a lot of it becomes that. I think the best example is the first segment of the show. It is complete improv every show. We don't know what's going to happen from 3 to 3:30. At least Joey and I have no idea. And then, some stuff we will have planned in our head, or we'll have some ideas, or where we know it's going to happen. But yeah, for sure, with the format that we currently have, there's a lot of improv.
Now, if we can, Mitch, we'd like to just do a quick rapid fire here, just kind of off the cuff, if you will. No Chris Nyland pun intended for his show on on TSN 690. Also, another great show to check out in the afternoons, I believe at 1 o'clock. But if you had to be quarantined with one member of your staff at TSN 690, who would it be and why?
I think I would go with Campbell, because we're super close, and I think I can get along with him for an extended period of time, where some of the other people on staff might drive me nuts.
Well, that's a perfect segue into the next one. So who would you not like to be quarantined with?
Oh gosh, I'll plead the fifth.
Don't want to throw any.
How about everybody else? I'll lump them all together.
Good answer. You want to be able to get along with everybody at work. I can appreciate that.
I can't throw anybody under the bus right now.
Wisdom, wise answer, my friend. Who's an interview subject in any sport that if you could choose that you have not interviewed yet that you would like to?
That's a really good question. I would say Tiger Woods.
And what is it about Tiger that what's the reason behind Tiger anyway?
Yeah, well, I mean, you got that Bulls jersey behind you, that beautiful number 23, and I know everyone's really enjoying The Last Dance and seeing the story that is Michael Jordan. And I'm 34 years old, so I'm part of that generation too that grew up with Michael Jordan. But at the same time, probably the second biggest athlete after Michael Jordan on the planet was Tiger Woods. And Tiger Woods' fame and greatness really coincided with my formative years. So I think he's a very complex individual, and I would love to try to get some insight as to what made him tick, what makes him tick now, and everything in between.
Well, it's the first different answer I've had because so far I've just gotten LeBron James. So appreciate that answer.
LeBron James seems like he'd be a cool fellow to talk to too, and you know what? Probably be an easier interview subject than Tiger Woods. But I'd try to pry something out of Tiger.
You mentioned The Last Dance here. I just happened to catch an episode and a half before I got on the air with you here, Mitch. So what has impressed you most about this documentary about the Chicago Bulls?
What's impressed me the most about the documentary is all the footage that they have accumulated that most people didn't know ever existed. Especially, you know, the documentation of the final championship won by the Chicago Bulls, among a bunch of the other stuff. Then you look into how beautifully it's shot, how many amazing interviews that they were able to compile, whether it was, you know, thoughts from Michael Jordan himself or President Barack Obama, you know, talking about Michael Jordan's impact on the city of Chicago and his impact on African American culture and sports. Everything put together has been so much fun to watch. And then the other thing, you know, that I love about the documentary is it really inspires me. Like I look at Michael Jordan's compete and how ruthless he was in his need and want to win, that when I watch a few of those episodes, I feel like I could run through a brick wall. So the documentary has done a really good job, I think, of bringing to light a lot of cool topics.
I can't possibly agree with you more. I mean, the 90s Bulls were my first love in sports, period. And I almost forgot that before watching this. And then as soon as you hear that music and then the introduction of the Chicago Bulls, I get goosebumps right away every time.
Yeah, and it's like there's so many different sides to it too, right? Which is what they're really kind of diving into, whether it's Scottie Pippen or Dennis Rodman. You know, I've read Phil Jackson's biography twice because I'm obsessed with what made that guy tick, because he's just so unique as a sports personality. And you know what? I can't wait to the next couple episodes to see, you know, Michael Jordan's venture into the world of baseball and then his attempted comeback with the Washington Wizards. So there's still more stories to be tackled.
Oh, yeah. I'm pretty sure people are standing by for every episode, the way it seems every time you check out Twitter. So one question about Phil Jackson, I think a lot of folks might agree that there was something to be learned about how he handled someone like Dennis Rodman. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, I don't know how that would work in today's day and age exactly, but I think that Phil Jackson realized that he had an individual that could help him win, but an individual that was very complex. So we had to find a way to get on that guy's side and also make sure that he got that guy playing at an elite level for him. Like if you listen to Dennis Rodman speak, he obviously has a extreme intelligence for the game of basketball. And just listen to the clip of him talking about the different angles and the different approaches he took to rebounding. But I really think that it takes a very comfortable in his own skin type of coach to be able to deal with a player who is very outside the team format like Dennis Rodman was, and make sure that guy is able to, at some point, coexist with his teammates who are also kind of volatile at times in guys like Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. But I think there's a great lesson that can be learned for any coach on how to deal with somebody that might not be easy to deal with, but you have to find a way to get through that player and make sure he helps you win.
That's what I'm thinking when it comes to, say, one most recent example with Claude Julien, how he's dealt with Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and there's got to be ways to get through a player and not let egos and emotions get too in the way. So, do you think this is translatable to, say, somebody like Claude Julien or any NHL coach?
Yeah, and I think every situation's a little bit different. Like when you're dealing with a player like Jesperi Kotkaniemi, you're dealing with a guy just trying to break his way into the NHL. So I do think there has to be at times that element of soft love. You can't just let the guy run free. When we're talking about Dennis Rodman, we're talking about a guy who's already a caliber player with 2 organizations, in the Pistons and the Spurs before he even got to Chicago. So that's not a guy who necessarily needs to be groomed and taught anything. That's a guy that you just got to find a way to get through to. But I do think there's other great examples of coaches not dealing with players very well, and that coming back to bite them in the behind, because you're only going to go as far as your best players take you, and sometimes you got to bite the bullet and find a way to manage different egos and personalities.
Well, last one here for you, Mitch. If you can, which Canadian city do you believe will raise the Stanley Cup next?
Kind of a loaded question to finish off. I'll go with I'll go with the Vancouver Canucks. I love how the Vancouver Canucks have built their team. I think Elias Pettersson is going to be an MVP, a caliber player. I think they got 2 solid goaltenders. I think they're building a nice blue line right now with Hughes. I think Brock Besser is a guy that's capable of scoring 25 to 30 goals a year. Horvat seems like he's going to be a good player. They got the Russian kid in the draft last year. Like, they have a lot of young talent, and I think that team is going to be the next Canadian team to lift the Stanley Cup.
We just thank you for taking the time, Mitch, and we'll hopefully do this again soon.
Cool, man. Thanks so much. Anytime.